A quick note before I begin, please ignore all the scratches on my hands. We just got a new baby land shark, and his tummies make the rumblies that only hens can satisfy. Hello, Infinity. You're back, and I'm back from vacation. I had this whole plan to make a cutesy, aesthetic travel art vlog while I was gone. I had a whole list of personal projects I wanted to accomplish, but life happened and I didn't get as much video of my actual art process, and now I'm here. So today I'll be going through what I was able to make on vacation, but before I begin, let me show you what was in my travel bag. Sketchbook number 1. Sketchbook number 2. Water-based markers. A travel set of gouache paint. A variety of paintbrushes. Washi tape. A kneaded eraser and a classic pink eraser. A mechanical pencil with color erase lead. Pens and fine liners. My tablet for digital art. All crammed into my shoulder bag that I found at a thrift store and keep trying to find a reason to use because it's really cute. So let me show you what I was able to do on my flight. Not much. I got harshly reminded that flying, let alone flying solo, cross-country with 0 hours of sleep, is not exactly conducive to the artistic process. After struggling to keep 2 brain cells together, this was the only thing I managed to draw that whole day. A masterpiece of hubris and the frailty of the human body. But I finally made it cross-country in one piece, and immediately isolated myself and crashed the first full day I was there. The main reason I was out there was to visit with family and celebrate my younger sibling graduating from high school. Woohoo! I was even put in charge of making the poster to hold up while they walked across the stage, which was technically the first artistic thing I made while on vacation. It was honestly such a blast, and I will always be eternally grateful that I got to congratulate them in person. However, even though I was out there to visit, I knew before I left that for most of the time I was going to be out there, I would be on my own, since everyone had to work or do some school things. Hence, why I had so many goals for the week I would be gone. I thought I was going to be so productive and get a lot of things done since I'd have all that free time to myself. The first thing I needed to tackle was the thumbnail for this video. I thought it'd be fun to use one of my tourist photos, but we didn't actually go anywhere, so instead I just walked outside and took an aesthetic photo of the rose bush in the backyard. Of course, adding my persona and the title, and ta-da! Well, you've already seen that, so let's move on. My real work started off with my current special topic. I felt the need to make some fan art of Ko Tetsutora from Stardust Rhapsody Anthem by Legends of Evantris. She is not my favorite character of theirs, but all of her scenes flirting make me laugh every time. The Evantris team had also just ended their Kickstarter, so I was riding the Neon Odyssey high for most of the week. I made this one with some gouache. Unfortunately, I did not record my process of making this one since I was just warming up, and I didn't want the process of making a YouTube video to distract me from the process of making this art. Don't worry, I will have footage of some of my other drawings that I did later. Since it was also Pride Month, I wanted to make some pieces to celebrate. I wanted to draw some of my own LGBT characters, so I sketched out everybody one day and then started painting in the sketches the following day. As for all of my characters, all of them are from my work-in-progress personal project, the offices of Liminal and Associated Spaces. First up, we have my favorite couple, Echoette and Pristine. They've been married for roughly 16 years, and I love them both so much. As you can see, I did not make it very far. I was hoping to finish these when I got back home, but life pretty much had me running ever since I got back. So this is a peer. They are the second half of the investigation duo. This is Echoette's partner when it comes to solving supernatural occurrences and mysteries for the offices of Liminal and Associated Spaces. I wasn't super inventive with this piece, so I think that's why I didn't really come back to it. but I might come back to it later. I do kind of enjoy how it looks. Ta-da! So this is Egris. This is the boss and the CEO of the offices of Liminal and Associates. She is Echoette and Appear's boss, and she actually is Arrow Ace. I thought would be really fun to give her little blushies of the Arrow Ace flag. She does look a little bit different than how you guys may have last seen her. I finally figured out how I wanted to make her supernatural, and that was to make her a Dullahan. Think the Headless Horseman. Some of the fun lore about the Headless Horseman is that the reason they occur is because of war and the battles not yet won. A little bit of spoilers, but she passed, but her battle against the supernatural and supernatural injustices isn't over, so she came back as a Dullahan. Ah, yes, my pouty little boy. I don't actually know if I'm going to keep him as a character. I I thought about it, and I don't think he really fits into the story as much. As much as I love his design and personality, I might not actually put him in the story. I don't even have a name for him yet still. So this is actually a new character that I have not shared yet. This is Six, aka Sylvie. She's going to come into play a lot later in the story, which is why I haven't really revealed her yet. But in case you're curious, she is pansexual. So I thought that would be really fun to do the pan flag going up her fingers for the peace sign. I thought that would be really fun and really cute. And that's all that I did in this sketchbook. For Friday, I felt the need to scribble. I was starting to get anxious for my flight back, so I wanted something less involved, but would still keep my hands and mind busy. So I started out with some development work for my webcomic. It was my biggest goal for this week, so I had to make sure that I did a little bit of progress. Unfortunately, because this is not an official sketchbook per se, it's actually a repurposed bullet journal. There is a little bit of ghosting and bleed through when it comes to some of my markers that I used pretty heavily. So I've made a proper reference sheet for Echoette before, but I never got around to making her eye the way that I wanted it to. Like, I never got into actually coloring it, but as you can see, it's very void-like, peering into the supernatural form. So this is actually how she's able to do her job due to the scar that the supernatural world has left upon her. Really love how this piece turns out. This was done with the watercolor markers, and there is a little bit of pilling of the paper just because it's not meant for heavy marker use, but I still think it held up pretty decently, and I really like how it turned out. So this is actually spoilers as well, so I'm not going to explain what this actually is, but it was really fun to do. You'll actually see that theme carried over of the heat map with the hands. I won't reveal who this character is, but this is another type of supernatural scarring that Echoette is able to see, and it appears up on this character, and that's how she sees them when Echoette looks at them with her eye, like peering into the supernatural world. Alrighty, next up, since this is kind of mainly focused on the offices of liminal and associated spaces, I wanted to make sure that each of my characters were going to be represented in their most current designs. So I dedicated a page to each of them, just practicing drawing them out from memory instead of looking up their references. Unfortunately, I did not bring with me the color of Pristine's hair, so I did go with a blonde instead of the like minty green that it actually is, but I still think that it's really cute. It's a very light color. And then next to them, I started writing out some of the things that have been rattling around inside of my brain that I've been wanting to write down for a while so that I don't forget them. They may or may not be important to the story yet, and as you can see, I didn't write a lot, but I definitely wanted to start writing some of my ideas down, which is why I started this. It's also going to be a messy sketchbook, but just having a place where I can start putting these ideas down. And another reason why I went with the bullet journal instead of a traditional sketchbook is the grids actually help me write out a little bit neater. instead of the randomness that was happening in a more traditional sketchbook. Here we are again. We have Appear and Six, aka Sylvie. As you can see, I sketched all of my characters out first in pencil, much like when I did the Pride Month art. I just wanted to doodle out their design and then I'd come back in later, but I wanted to make each page dedicated to them. So I will come back and color these two in. Appear, I already know what their color palette is going to look like. I have a general idea, but Sylvie I've actually only drawn with my sketch pens and sketch pencils, so I don't actually know what Sylvie's color palette is going to look like yet. So that'll be a fun thing that I will be exploring later in the future. So this is another spoiler character. I will not be saying who that is, but as you can see, he is a very sad old man. And then, of course, we have Egris, my queen. She is very wonderful, and I'm really glad that I made her the Doulahan because drawing her head flame is so much fun. And I feel like it ties into the green color palette that I gave her a lot better instead of her original red hair, which actually she does still have red hair when viewed by people who have not been indoctrinated into the supernatural world. So the way that the offices of liminal and associated spaces works currently is that only people who have the supernatural scarring are able to perceive and then understand the supernatural world. So people can still perceive supernatural occurrences, but then their brain tries to rationalize it. Whereas if you have a supernatural scar, you truly see it for what it is. People who look at Egris actually still see the black woman with red hair, but she is actually a Doulahan. This is the first rough draft of chapter 1. I actually was able to start sketching this out on my digital tablet during vacation, but I wanted to write out the script first and then start thumbnailing how I want all of the panels to turn out. Spoiler alert, some of these panels do end up sticking and I changed some of them later. Of course, because since today's main focus was actually not supposed to be involved projects, I quickly moved on after I started thumbnailing and started working on my fundamentals instead. And I got the fun idea to make it a rainbow for Pride Month. As you can see, there was a little bit of theme while I was on vacation. It was a pretty fun challenge, and I think you guys should try it if you want to dust up on some practice. So for each color of the rainbow, you pick something that you want to practice and you fill a page or two. I did make sure to look up references since this is going to be practice. The nice thing about doing it this way is that there's an end goal, because there are only 6 colors in the rainbow, excluding indigo. And depending on the size of your sketchbook, it's actually pretty easy to fill up a page with all of your reference practice. So for my challenge, I started off with doing some gesture drawing. I made sure to look up pose references off of Pinterest for dynamic posing, because that's something that I'm still struggling with today. None of them had to be overly detailed, and I tried not to spend too much time on each individual drawing, but rather trying to get the vibe going. It was a mix of relaxing and lounging poses, because I struggle with sitting, and then also some action and fighting poses, because I need a lot of practice for action shots for my webcomic. So orange was continuing my figure drawing, but this time focusing more on perspective and action rather than someone who's just standing there posing for the photo. And of course, I had to practice men as much as I practiced my women. Unfortunately, I am still better at drawing women than I am with men, but this is definitely helping me understand their proportions a little bit better, and I did have to make sure to dedicate an entire page just to men. Moving on to yellow, this one is faces, specifically focusing on facial expressions while also working on likeness. I wanted to make sure that my drawings both looked like the reference person that I was drawing while also understanding what made an expression look the way that it did. So why this looks like disgust over this looking like surprise. And don't mock me, I understand that this one's a little rough. I don't even know if you're going to be able to see this as well. Also, please let me know if you know who this is. I did use a reference of a famous person, but then I took a photo of it and sent it to my partner. And it wasn't until I showed them the reference photos side by side that they actually could figure out who this is. So let me know in the comments if you're able to tell who this is. Green, which of course is the most interesting fundamental that I wanted to work on. So this is all about shapes and perspective, and specifically drawing shapes in perspective. So I followed along with some of the studies that I found on Pinterest. People post these all the time. There's the classic sphere, which helps with rotation of round objects, which definitely helps with head positioning, which is something that I struggle with. So breaking things down just to their most basic shapes and then how it rotates in space definitely helps. Cubes are obviously the easiest thing to understand in perspective. So of course, I had to do a cube page. Then I did another type of art study. This one is drawing a whole row of rectangular prisms around a curve and understanding how light and shadow help with perspective as well. So perspective is not only angle, but also light and shadow, which helps imply form, which is what this study is for as well. I did my sphere, my cube, and this one is an ice cream cone upside down. I don't remember what the actual shape is called. I did some cloth studies, and then this is actually supposed to be a rose. I think it would have been more clear if I did it in red instead of green, but this was the green page and I wanted to still stick with my main colors. So you might have noticed with these past drawings, I just stuck with one of my water-based markers, but for these ones, because I was trying to imply shading in form, I actually busted out 3 different shades of green to help emphasize what I was studying. But all of them still staying in the green family. On to blue. Blue is specifically hands. Hands are a struggle for almost every artist, I want to say. So it never hurts to dust up on your hand practice and trying to break down all of the forms in different ways. There's 100 different techniques on how artists will draw hands, but when it all boils it down to, it's breaking down hands into their most basic shapes that make sense to you. So this one is just practicing drawing the hands with the most basic shapes, and then these are actually practicing drawing hand wraps, which again is going to be important for my webcomic because Echoette here, when she has to get into a bit of a tussle and fight the supernatural, has magically imbued hand wraps that she is able to actually interact with ghosts and such. I also had to practice on shoes. I could have just drawn feet, but shoes are actually what gives me the hardest time. They're so weird. I'm definitely still struggling with this, so I foresee a lot more shoe practice in my future. As for the different styles of shoes, I actually wanted to do a fashion study as well for the rough time period aesthetic that I'm kind of going for my webcomic. So I wanted some Mary Janes and some Doc Martens and a classic men's dress shoe. Finally, my favorite color, purple. And this is specifically character interaction because I've only really practiced drawing my characters as stills. I don't have them interacting as much. And since I plan to draw a webcomic and they're going to be interacting, I definitely need to practice all of their different interactions. And because this is the final color, I wanted to put into practice all of the previous colors that I had been studying. So my different dynamic poses, my expressions, my different perspectives that I was working on as well. I had a lot of fun with this page and I'm very excited to start working on my comic. Finally, as the wrap up to my fundamentals, I decided to work on some line control. So it's just scribbling out a funky shape and then getting as close as you can around the shape with your pen to practice your fine motor skills. It's actually a really fun way to fill up a page, and it's oddly calming and soothing in a way. For my final day out there visiting my family, I wanted to include my siblings in some way, so I had them pick out 5 random colors for me to work with. I started with the palette given to me by my graduating sibling first, in honor of them graduating. And totally not because the other sibling had already gone back to college and took forever to text me back. Thanks, bro. The ever clever troll chose red, maroon, crimson, rose, and Mike Wazowski green. I simply Googled up the color name and color selected from the first image that would pop up. So some of the issues I ran into could have been entirely my fault, instead of looking up the proper hex code or whatever. I made sure not to hit record until I figured out what I was going to draw, or I would have ended up having 3 hours of a blank canvas to delete. I was stumped for sure. The color palette was giving me hazard lights, which probably was my first mistake, because my 4 shades of red did not give me enough contrast to pull off the effects I really wanted. Problem number 2, I don't know why I keep going for a lineless style. Granted, this one was going to have some line work, just to help break up all the similar colors. But again, I don't know what I was thinking trying to make it as lineless as possible. Maybe just to save up on my colors. Critique number 3, I think I should have used the more pinky red for her skin and used the green as the highlight color throughout the piece instead of just the accent color in her eyes and mouth, which is how I was originally trying to imply radioactivity. I think it would have added a lot more clarity and balance to the overall piece. And you know what? I might still do that because that's right, I did not finish this piece on vacation either. Hey, vacation is really about relaxation. And sure, working on art was relaxing, but I also got to visit with my family and turn my brain off and lounge on the couch for a couple of hours and not have to worry about doing anything. That's truly the essence of vacation, or at least it's how I like to enjoy mine. If you wanted to try to complete the challenge on your own with the unused palette, this is what sibling number 2 chose. Finally, after a relaxing week in the timeless abyss that is vacation, it was time to go home back to reality. My flight back was a little bit more productive than my flight out. I wasn't sure if the tablet screen recordings would save correctly while in the air, so unfortunately I don't have video of what I did on the plane, but I do have video of my outlining process that I did earlier in the week, which is what you are watching now. I'm hoping that this is going to be the first chapter in my webcomic, The Offices of Liminal and Associated Spaces. Coming soon. I don't know how soon, but definitely coming soon. I also learned something about myself that day. Now, I've drawn in moving vehicles before. I've even drawn on a plane before. But apparently, in my adult years, if I try to draw on my digital tablet while experiencing very mild turbulence, I get extremely motion sick. I've only ever experienced motion sickness once before in my life, and it was in a rickety old RV up a windy mountain road, and everybody felt sick that day. So I'm not quite sure what my problem was with the digital tablet, but apparently that was going to be a hard no. So it definitely put a cap on what I was able to do that day. I wasn't able to finish the chapter, but I did take it from this to this in 2 hours. And honestly, that's the most progress I've ever made on this comic, so I'm going to take it as a win. And now I'm back home. And just in time for Art Fight, which some of the characters you've seen today are actually up for attack. Hopefully I'll have a video about my first Art Fight experience up next month. Thank you so much for joining me in my little pocket of the chaos. If you enjoyed the madness, drop a like or comment, or perhaps even a subscribe to see what might come next. I can also be found across the webiverse on Cara, Bluesky, Instagram, and Tumblr. If you seek even more chaos, consider checking out this video here, where I made the reference sheets for the characters featured in this video. Alrighty, see you later. Okay, bye.